Hello there, and welcome to episode 6 of Nothing Else Mattress, the music podcast that's setting out to establish what we think possibly be the greatest 100 albums ever made. We've reviewed 25 so far, I think, and from the Rolling Stone list, we've got 14 in and 11 out. So, just over 50% at the moment, so we're doing okay with it. Going to do another 5 tonight, and we've obviously got our friends on here to do them with us. So we have tonight George. How you doing, mate? Up you, who loves compilations. We have Bird's Eye John. Hi John, how you doing, mate?
Aye, Captain.
I can't with that, no. And we have Stephen. How you doing, sir?
Run you, mate. How you doing?
Yeah, great. Good to see you again.
Good to be here.
See you. Good stuff. Okay, so as I say, we've got 5 on the list to review tonight, which should all be good fun. So we will kick off number 75 with Aretha Franklin and Lady Soul. So just read out the summary from the Rolling Stone magazine and then we can crack on. Aretha Franklin's third Atlantic album in less than 2 years is another classic, with You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman, Ain't No Way, and a slinky version of the Rascals grooving. It was a year of triumph and turbulence for Franklin. Although she made the cover of Time, the magazine reported details of her rocky marriage to Ted White, then her manager. But Franklin channeled that frenzy into performances of funky pride and magisterial hurt. Among the best, the grand prayer treatment of Curtis Mayfield's People Get Ready and her explosive anguish on the hit Chain of Fools. So that's Rolling Stone summary. Aretha Franklin released January 68. So George, you want to lead us off, mate?
Yeah, sure. This is, I'm a big soul fan. This is, in my opinion, optimum soul. 1968, Aretha Franklin's. It's not her first album since leaving Columbia and joining Atlantic, but it's a massive, massive statement album. It's a woman at the peak of her powers. She's got her sister Carolyn. Erna's not on this though, but Carolyn's on it along with Whitney Houston's mother, Sissy. The Sweet Inspirations, who later teamed up with Elvis, they're all backing her as well. You've got Bobby Womack on guitar, King Curtis on saxophone, Spooner Oldham writing songs and playing the organ. It couldn't not be a soul classic as far as I'm concerned. There's something about her, Aretha is one of my all-time touchstones when it comes to soul music. And it opens with the phenomenal Chain of Fools. It's just such a dirty groove. It's so contrary to the stuff she was recording, the sort of standards she was recording for Columbia. So this is she's definitely found her gear by the time Lady Soul comes out. It was so popular. It reached the top 3 in not only the soul charts, but in the pop Billboard charts and the jazz charts. So, it was straying into, other territories. But there's something about her when she, there's not many artists I've found that can take a really strong, powerful song that's already been established and completely turn it on its head and own it like Aretha Franklin. There's no many people that can do it like her. She did it with Otis Redding's Respect. She turned that right around and basically claimed it for herself. She did it with Dionne Warwick's Bacharach and David's I Say a Little Prayer, which is actually Aretha's version's my all-time #1 favourite recording. Has been since I've been 15, 16 years old. It still is 40 odd years later.
But so that was on, I think I was on the album after this one, I think, because you say, George, she had all those Columbia records.
After this one, she was like battering out at this point. I think it was a Columbia record that came after this before, it was Aretha Now, I think it was.
That's right, yeah.
But she was in such a groove at this point. But what she did to Carole King's You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman is just, it transcends musical styles, genres. It's just a masterpiece, an absolute fucking masterpiece. And if you want to know what Carole King thought about it, all you have to do is go to the YouTube and look at the 2015 Kennedy Center Honours and Aretha's final hurrah, probably our last great moment as an artist, where she plays You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman for Carole King. And it's, George, it moved her to tears. It moved Carole King to tears. So if it can do that, then there's no fucking way in God's earth this is not making it in the top 100. It's in.
Right, well, let's move to the next album then. All right, save us the bother. I think, I think she absolutely hit that run of form when she moved over to Atlantic and the whole Jerry Wexler story, and we did a bit of this with Dusty, didn't we?
Yep.
And you know,
Different level though.
Yeah, absolutely, George. I'm sure the guys will have a view on it. So she had these 3 albums a year. First one kind of made her, and then she had a bit of a sort of, not a filler, but a sort of second album out pretty quickly, and then she brought out Lady Soul. And yeah, you're right. It kind of seemed to just hit all the right spots. So is there anything that you know that would put you off recommending it? I know it's a killer record, but is there any, I don't know, any padders in there, or is there any?
Yeah, I'm not overly keen on Nikki Hokey. It's one of those songs that did the rounds. It was recorded by a couple of people. I think it was actually it was written by the guy from Redbone who did Witch Queen of New Orleans and Come and Get Your Love. That's a bit of a, well, just keep this in there just to fill it up. If you compiled the best of her recordings from 1968 on a compilation, you'd have probably the greatest soul album of all time. But it's pretty good. You know, grooving's all right. People Get Ready. She does a really good job on it because, you know, it dips into the gospel that she loves so much. But there's so much good stuff on this that it massively outweighs the sort of, as you say, padding stuff.
Yeah, and it was another huge seller. She had #1 singles on it. She was 2 in the main Billboard, but she was 1, 2, and 3 on 3 different genre billboards, which is you know, almost unheard of. So not only was it, you know, critically received, but it was absolutely smashing it as well. So and fantastic album. Stephen, what's your take, mate?
I love it. It's 100% in my opinion. The woman was playing a different league to the rest of them. But you consider who's, I mean, Beyonce, come on, please, enough. Rihanna, this sort of nonsense. Don't bow down, please. Right?
Yeah.
This is the queen.
Queen of Soul, right?
And I'll keep this short and sharp. 100% in my opinion. I agree with George. She's wonderful. He's more eloquent than me, but wow, just get that one in there.
Get it in.
100%.
Okay, doing so well, John.
Yeah, well, for a start, soul's not my genre in general, but I can appreciate good and great music when I hear it, and this is just absolutely sensational. I mean, her voice on this album is just incredible. Loved it. First track, Chain of Fools, just obviously very well known song. When I was reading up on this after I'd listened to it, she's only 26 and it was her 12th studio album, which is just absolutely ridiculous. And, you know, there's a number, I think as well, one of the things, there's a number of songs here that have been released before by other artists, James Brown, for example. That seemed to be quite a thing that was done in those days. You know, somebody would release a song in 67, somebody else is covering it a year later, you know, if that, sometimes the same year. So I think that's quite an interesting dynamic, particularly at that time. I don't think it really happens these days for whatever reason. But you look at some of the songs there that have been, you know, written by the likes of, you know, Carole King, Wexler, Curtis Mayfield, James Brown, etc., etc. But, you know, her voice is absolutely incredible. And one of the things as well, I think the musicianship on it is good. The song "Good to Me as I Am to You," I was listening to that, and the one thing that struck me right away was the guitar work on it. So I had a look later, and it's Clapton that's playing the guitar on it.
We'll not
It's just
hold that
no.
against her, though.
No,
Yeah,
we
is that
won't.
a good
We
thing?
won't.
Yeah.
Well, his guitar playing, to be fair, on
Yeah.
that is
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
is
yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah. Can knock a lick out,
So
can't
exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
so many good songs. You know, People Get Ready, Natural Woman, etc., etc. I think absolutely fantastic. For me, it's in. I think, is it a question for me? Is it nearly as good as the Commitments soundtrack album? I'm not sure, quite frankly. That statement may or may not be true,
it?
but I'm voting it in.
Yeah, well, you're such a fan
Yeah.
of compilations, John. That makes sense,
Exactly.
doesn't it?
I kind of thought I had to get that point in, you know.
Yeah.
Many times tonight you go to say the word compilations.
Scud book indeed. Yeah, and it'll be interesting because I mean I'll just concur with all of that. I think it's an amazing record. I suppose no such thing as a perfect record, but this must be getting pretty close, I guess. Plus, it's 28 minutes long, the original record. So
Yeah, no messing
in and
about.
out, right? In and out, all killer, no filler. It'll be interesting. She's one of the artists that has another one on the list further up. You know, and if you haven't checked, you'd probably guess what it is. But you know,
Aretha now, wouldn't it? Yeah.
I Never Loved a Man.
I never loved that man. Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
so but I think primarily because of respect, George, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
But obviously we can, we'll get to review that as and when it comes. But yeah, I'd be hard pushed, I would say, to Better Lady Soul based on sort of reappraising that. And the only other thing I picked up, there's two things I picked up. One was all the chat about what an amazing pianist she is, which kind of gets lose sight of that. But yeah, you lose sight a bit about that. But in the world of piano players and stuff, like, she's rated massively highly for that. And the other thing was
Brian didn't know that.
112 Billboard singles. 112.
Wow.
112. That's 2 for every year I've been born. So yeah.
Whoa.
That's true. Yeah, so I don't think there's a lot to add. Twitter were 85% yes, absolute slam dunk. Probably one of the easiest albums we'll ever review. Yeah.
I would agree.
So before for 4, yeah.
I'm good.
Brilliant. That was in. Good. Give us a bit of time and space to chat about some of the other ones. So Aretha's in. 74 is Kanye West, The College Dropout. So let me just get the notes from Kanye. So in 2003, Kanye West was a Chicago kid who produced some hot beats for Jay-Z, wore pastel polo shirts with the collars popped and wanted to be on the mic, not behind it. Record labels were skeptical, but West got over on wit and determination. He wrote and sang the hit Through the Wire while his jaw was wired shut after being in a car accident, and followed it with the more dynamic tracks including Slow Jams, about the seductive power of soul music, and the gospel riot Jesus Walks. West loved Jesus and strip clubs, made arrogant claims about his talent, and then professed his insecurity, which made his music all the richer. Kanye West, The College Dropout. Released February 2004. Who's brave enough to jump on this one?
Me immediately.
Go on, Steve.
Total fool. And I don't have the words to describe how low I feel this guy.
Is this hold on? Is his songs or the person?
Both. Talentless flood. I've got zero time for the man. I'm trying to be objective. I'm trying to see the good in it.
I can see that.
But I'm sorry. This guy's just. Even before we started all this, I put it down on the Excel sheet. I cannot go this man 1 inch.
And listening to the record, you haven't taken any redeeming features out of the record then? 76 minutes worth of it.
It makes a good bonfire.
A good Bonnie.
Would you say?
Sorry.
Would you say worse than Drake, George? Was that your?
Is it worse than Drake, Stephen?
That's a photo finish.
Okay.
Listen, Brian gave me a row a couple of weeks ago for being a negative Nancy, right? And probably rightly so. But and I'm sorry, but I'm back in the room doing it again. I simply cannot go this guy or his stuff. There's no redeeming features whatsoever, in my humble opinion.
So you're
That's
you're
a
may,
maybe.
you're maybe yeah, absolutely.
That's a big get him. See where George that stands with Metallica. I
Yeah,
stand here. Ooh, that's big.
I get a bit of a hard time about that at the weekend.
about Metallica.
Yeah, I've a couple of martial arts fans.
Watch yourself, George.
No, honestly, I was cornered in Edinburgh by two people who are both black belt in martial arts, and they weren't very
You're
happy.
deaf, George.
They weren't very happy that about my view on both Metallica and AC/DC.
I hope you told them there were a couple of scud books.
No, I think they could see from my expression that I was deadly serious. I wasn't for backing down. So David and Alan, if you're watching this, I stand totally by my decision to batter Metallica and AC/DC the way that you would probably batter me if you could catch me, but
Yeah,
you can't. So
Dave-
anyway,
David and Alan, if you're watching this, can you come on and tell us what George actually said when he met him? bought the cappuccinos all around, right? Yeah.
I had a table between us, so thankfully I was.
Yeah. So a wee bit of context here, and we'll come on to George and John. So he's got six. In fact, he's only made six albums in the top 500, and the only artists with more than that are Dylan, Neil Young, and the Beatles.
Holy shit!
He's got another one in the 100, pretty far up the list, which I'm sure we'll get to. And before he became the artist that we know him, he had a significant reputation as a producer, which is in effect how he ended up doing what he's doing. So it's one of these interesting ones that, as ever, the more you sort of dig in and find out a bit more, that whether you like it or hate it, but there's always a bit more to the story than maybe you first thought. So, so John, what are you thinking, mate?
So I think I've probably been living in a bubble because I listened to the album. Again, it's 75 minutes, 21 songs. Quantity isn't everything, and there's too much quantity going on here. It needs to be slimmed down. He's got some good collaborations going on there to a point. A bit more substance than Drake, I would say. There's a couple of decent songs. I quite liked All Falls Down, joint vocal. Selena Johnson's got a beautiful voice on that. I liked that. I'll Fly Away. It was really, really old school a cappella. There's a bit piano going on in the background, but really old school blues. And I thought, that really ticked a lot of boxes for me. And also, there's a song, Get 'Em High, which mentions Tiger Woods. So anything that's related to golf and music, it gets a massive tick for me, right? Stop it, George. Stop it. Right. So, and there's a bit of sampling going on, a bit of, Distance Lover, Marvin Gaye, other bits and pieces as well.
Bacharach and David.
Bacharach and David as well, going on in there. And then I was reading up about him, and I must admit, I basically steer away from all of this, sensationalism, or the Kardashians and all that. If I see anything on that, I switch TV off. So I had no clue whatsoever what's been going on with his personal views. And I'm thinking, what the actual fuck, right? Running for president, he's got certain views, and I'm thinking, oh Jesus, what is going on here? So he's a prick, right? In my book, he's an absolute prick.
I said that about 10 minutes ago.
You did, Stephen. To be fair, but I didn't know that because it's taken nothing to do with that. But so when I found out, it was absolutely unbelievable, and I'm glad I listened to the album first because I'm sure it would have clouded my judgment more. So while there are some good songs in there, as I mentioned, there's too much. It lasts too long. Is it a top 100 album? Absolutely not, as far as I'm concerned.
So again, just sort of context again before Josh comes in, and I understand all your comments about the sort of personal noise and stuff, but this album was what, 2004?
So, yeah.
So to the best of my knowledge, when that came out and he broke through, you know, I don't think if that was how he was, it certainly wasn't the public domain.
No.
He was just another guy trying to come through and make his way, really. And interestingly, what he sang about was the absolute opposite of the majority of sort of gangster rap and things that, you know, would have given that genre a bad press. He specifically tried to move away from that and was much more about socio-economic issues, family, you know, all that type of stuff, which is really where the album came from. So you're right to flag it because it's there and it's fact. But certainly at that time, I think he was just a guy making a record, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I say. I mean, I
Yeah.
think there are some really good songs on it, you know, which I've tried to, you know, outline there for, you know, from my perspective. But there's just too much. 75 minutes, 21 songs. It just bores me.
Okay, mate. So it sounds like a no. George.
Like John, I'm very much of the school that if I see the name Kardashians in a newspaper or a magazine or on a TV channel, I instantly change it. I don't want that kind of vacuous pish in my life. So I tend to just say, rather than invest even a couple of seconds finding out about it, I'd rather not have it in my life because it's just shallow as fuck, and I'm no interested. So when obviously Kanye West's married to a Kardashian, I'm culturally aware enough to know that is the case, but I couldn't tell you which one, and I'm not that bored. But you know, I try to listen to this. I've made a mistake on previous episodes of having preconceived ideas about certain people and you know, genres before I've had a listen to them, and it sort of come back and bit me in the arse. So I thought, you know what, I've thoughts about Kanye and what I know of him from, you know, things that I can't avoid. You know, it's you know, it's almost cartoonish kind of character he's become, Trump supporting fucking nutcase. But there's something about this that I have to say the first maybe 25 minutes of it really did drag me in, and I was really surprised at how much I was enjoying it, oddly. You know, opens really well with it We Don't Care tune, which made me, you know, obviously was a big influence on people like the Avalanches and what they subsequently did. Cracking samples from a guy like Jimmy Castor Bunch, and they've got Land of Hope and Glory in there as well, which is, it's all really, you know, wildly inventive. All Falls Down, as John mentioned, is a pretty decent song. It's a cracking groove, but I loved the really stripped back "I'll Fly Away," the old gospel, you know, hymn. Nailed that one properly. It pulled the rug from under me, that one. But then Spaceships, I felt, was probably the best tune on the whole thing, and it borrows heavily from Marvin Gaye's "Distant Lover." So I was really enjoying, you know, being taken aback by the paradox that, you know, the lyrical themes are quite dark and brutal, but they're coated in a soulful way, and he was showing a lot of vulnerability and fragility that I just didn't expect from this, you know, fucking gay fish loving cartoon character that we seem to have been ubiquitous in the last 10, 15 years. It can't, you know, it can't sustain that momentum in the first 25 minutes. And again, like the other guys, it's like far too long, and it gets a bit bogged down in the middle until Mos Def arrives towards the end with two words, and that drags it back up again. But there's a bit too much of that chipmunk soul, they call it.
Yeah.
You know, the high-pitched voices towards the second half, which suggests to me that he'd run out of ideas. You know, I'd say the first 25 minutes you're talking, that's a really promising debut album. You know, you'd have to say that, put my hands up and say, take his odious personality out the equation and his odd views, and I would say that was a pretty decent opening 25 minutes, half an hour. But it's not strong enough, in my opinion, to make it into the top 100.
Okay, and like other albums, if you imagined it being a 35 to 40 minute, eight to nine tracks record, putting aside the sort of Kanye personality discussion, do
Well,
you think that would be a particularly strong album?
I'd be the same with people like Van Morrison. You know, Van
Mhm.
Morrison's a fucking, you know, from what I've heard from fans and people who know him, a fucking horrid human being. So that would colour. It does a wee bit colour my
It
enjoyment of,
does, yeah.
you know, some of his albums. And you know, we've had discussions with John before about Morrissey, and you
Yep.
know, as
To
much
be
as I love the Smiths, his input sort of makes me reluctant to dip back into them. It makes me reluctant to dip back into his own back catalogue rather than the Smiths.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's very hard to take the art away from the artist, especially when they're so their personalities are so overbearing.
I think when the art and the artist are in the same area, it becomes more difficult. You know,
Yeah.
there's that. It's almost as you, I think you mentioned, like a cartoon character, and it almost becomes a little bit difficult to separate the two out. Whereas with
Yeah.
Morrison, and he absolutely has some issues as a person, but you know, there's quite a lot of space between what he appears to be individually, and then when you put on Astral Weeks or whatever, you know, you can connect the two, but I don't think
Yeah.
you automatically do it by putting the record on. I think with Kanye, you're almost in that world pretty quickly when
Yeah.
as soon as you hear it, which is hard to strip back out again. I mean, I think his influences, he was massively influenced by the Miseducation of Lauryn Hill,
Yep.
which is obviously a killer record, and in turn was a massive influence on Kendrick Lamar.
You can see there's
Pimp a
a
Butterfly and stuff.
definite line between them. Yeah, it's Lauryn
Absolutely.
Hill's. It's one of her songs. It's actually one of her tunes. Is It All Falls Down?
Yeah,
Is that
she's on the album
one?
somewhere, isn't she?
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's the
Yeah.
song. I think they sampled one of Lauryn Hill's songs from that album for this album. I don't know whether she's actually on the album, but on
Hmm.
this album. But yeah, you can definitely draw a line. It's another case of there's a distinct line from Lauryn Hill to Kanye to Kendrick Lamar and beyond. So
Massively successful, and I know you have a view on streams, George, so I won't quote any of that, mate, but he's debut album, #2 Billboard, 500,000 copies sold in the first week, ×4 platinum in 4 years, won a Grammy for Best Rap Album, was even top 10 in the UK, which I found a bit surprising to be honest, but it was, and it ended up being platinum in the UK as well. So this guy's walked the talk a little bit. And you know, broadly speaking, has still continued to do that, albeit with a bit of diminishing returns as he went through his career. And I guess you know, it's one of these ones when we take a vote on it, and we'll be right back here again. It's like almost it's like the mirror image of the Aretha chat, where I think we say there's another Aretha one coming.
yeah,
And we'll probably look forward to that, won't we? I guess. But we've got another Kanye coming, so I think you know, it'll be difficult to then start again almost, and
no,
you know,
I'll happily go and have another listen to something and try and put any negative feelings I have about him and his music aside,
yeah.
and just try and treat it as the exercise that it is. Listen to the piece
Yeah.
of music and determine whether I feel it's worthy of inclusion.
Okay, mate. Yeah, cool. And there is an Aretha sample on there as well, just to link us back to
Yeah, Spirit
the
in the
last album.
Dark, but she,
Yeah.
that chipmunk pish just ruined it.
It
It
does,
really
yeah.
was like that was the absolute final straw for me. It's like, how dare you do that? That's just
This sits right between your question earlier on about Drake, George, this sits right between Drake for me and Frank Ocean. Where
Really?
I actually came to really like the Frank Ocean record, and I think this
Yep.
probably sits somewhere in the middle. I think there's some really good stuff on here, but not strong enough to be a,
Well,
a,
I would say it's
greatest
better
album.
than Drake's. I'd say it's
Yeah,
fucking light
absolutely.
years ahead of Drake's, but
Yeah.
not for me.
Okay.
If he'd cut this album in half, then it would stand a chance.
Yeah, maybe, but he did, but he didn't. So
He didn't. So
absolutely. So just double checking. Anyone fighting to put this one in? No.
No.
Stephen, you were putting a case up there, weren't you?
No.
Sorry.
I'm trying to be more empathetic. I'm trying to be observational.
No. It's Kanye. You can say what you want.
No, but I'm sorry, the man's a weapon, and I can't be doing with it.
Absolutely. Any more piece of information, John, before we move on?
no,
I've
more.
got one, mate.
Go
You
on.
like this?
Go on.
I think you will enjoy this one. He was sued by Evil Knievel. Yeah, I'm not even going to explain.
I know
you can't.
Kanye.
I'm going to leave that one for another
You
podcast.
can't-
Okay.
You can't leave it hanging.
Okay.
You have
Everyone
to-
will
you have to-
frantically be away googling and Wikipedia.
I know the
that.
video. It's where he jumps the canyon.
Yeah, he does. He
Kanye-
pretends
Kanye.
to jump the canyon thing, and he's called Evil, kind of evil or something. So, and but anyway, he went to saw him and said he was a lovely man. Evil said of Kanye. So before he died, the year before he died. So, and there you are. All's well that ends well. Okay, so I think we're an absolute 4 for 4 there. That's not a top 100 record. So for the moment, Kanye is out. We'll see him later on down the line. 73 was My Bloody Valentine with Loveless. So this vague, shimmering, gorgeous album reportedly cost as much as $500,000 to make and nearly bankrupted the band's UK label. It was worth it. Forget the lyrics, which are buried in the mix and incomprehensible, and focus on Kevin Shields and Belinda Butcher's guitars, which build entire noise symphonies out of tremolo effects and pitch bending. Highlights like Only Shallow and I Only Said use sampling technology to build a distorted, shifting sound that is wholly original and ecstatically beautiful. It's like being serenaded by ghosts. Generations of shoegaze bands were born in its shadow. Loveless by My Bloody Valentine, released November 1991. John, do you want to lead off, mate?
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, I love it. It's dissonant, sonic. It's like glass shattering, melting your ears. The lyrics, Christ knows what they are. They're so low in the mix. It's almost like an afterthought, really. And it's really about that sort of white noise, experimental guitar sound that probably reached out to a number of bands that were starting out and thought that's the way to go, but nobody did it like My Bloody Valentine, basically. Bands like Ride, potentially, Spiritualized, Slow Dive, you can see they're probably the better ones, but I think they did inspire some shit that followed, but I love this album. The backstory to it was it's absolutely crazy. I think they were in 19 different studios trying to get the sound right. Kevin Shields was basically the main guy in the band. I think he was trying to find a sound that no one else could hear. Countless engineers. It's a bankrupted creation. Dick Green, who was in second in command at creation, had a nervous breakdown, and apparently his hair turned grey overnight. While we were going through this, he couldn't even explain the sound he was trying to make to the rest of the band, so they don't actually appear on the record, despite the fact they're a fully functioning band at that point. So it's just the whole backstory. It's pretty crazy, but the sound of it, I just absolutely love. Songs like Only Shallow, the first song, just sets it up. There's just so much going on. A really, really interesting album. Funnily enough, it's not an album I've ever owned. Didn't have it at the time, but always a band I've been kind of quite into, so to speak. But 2.5 years to record it as well. And just come back to that point on what Kevin Shields was trying to find, and I doubt very much ever got it. But that you read these mad stories from time to time. There's like Lee Mathers with the Lads. He was very similar, their album and just try to find a sound, and he still moans about that record today. And I think Kevin Shields probably the same. He'll find fault in this.
Yeah.
But sonically, it's they're making sounds that I've no idea how they've pulled that together. But I really like it.
So why do you think you never bought a copy, John?
I don't know. It was like a band that I was aware of, but I'd pick them up for compilations and CDs and stuff like that. But I never actually. I think at that point in time, it was probably the sound was probably a bit too heavy for me in some ways. But I really appreciate it. Probably over the last few years. And I think live they were. I speak to some of my mates about the loudest gig you've ever been to, and ended seeing My Bloody Valentine. They'll stick their hand up. They were off the scale loud, apparently, when they played.
The Cult at the Barrowland.
All right, with the Cult.
Cult were the loudest band I've ever heard.
All right, I thought you said they played with the Cult. That'd be good.
You're talking the loudest band.
Yeah.
The Cult at the Barrowland. I lost a couple of felons because of them.
I think it's Danny Kelly, isn't it? Says he went to see them in the Roundhouse or somewhere in London, and his pint of lager jumped out his hand because of the vibrations when they come on, which I can get. The reason I asked about the album, John, was that I've never owned a copy either, right? And I have listened to this so much over the last fortnight, more than any of the other records, and I'm still not convinced I'd buy a copy. Don't dislike it. There's so much of it I really like.
Yeah.
Obviously, the sound's fantastic, but I think there's something. I don't think there's any songs on the record.
I think it's.
I'm sorry to rephrase that. There are songs on it. I'm not sure that the songs are over an album's worth are strong enough to be considered potentially to be a top 100 album. Although I love the sound, it sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's not commercial.
Well, it tanked, didn't it, when it came out?
It will,
tanked.
Yeah. I mean, it'll appeal to not very many people, I suspect, but it does appeal to me.
Are you going to rush out and buy a copy then?
I might do.
It's really interesting. I genuinely asked myself the same question why I've never bought it. I've bought other stuff of that ilk, but never that. So what are you thinking, John? Are you thinking in or out, or for the list? You can hold that if you want. We'll get around to
it. Yeah.
Okay. George.
I was actually living in Camden at the time of the release of this, which was pretty much the epicenter of shoegaze and the subsequent musical movements that followed. I can't say I was a huge fan of shoegaze, even though I was at the Barfly a couple of times. I can't say I was I was particularly into this kind of music. So it was a chance for me. I know about My Bloody Valentine, and they were one of the bands that were always talked about every week in the NME, and so it was one of these bands that you really, if you were going to be cool, you needed to like My Bloody Valentine. So I can't remember much about them, to be honest with you. So having a listen to them, all the listens to them today, it was a real surprise to hear how experimental it actually was. It's probably like Bitches Brew for skinny wee denim wearing pricks. It's really out there experimental. Only Shallow, it started off the album, and it was pleasant and surprising, but by the time, the next couple of tunes, Loomer, I think, was the next one. It was like 3 songs playing simultaneously, and it definitely had that kind of Bitches Brew vibe for me. It was experimental and not experimental in a pleasant sounding way. It was interesting, it was abstract, but it drifted too often into the aimless for me, and it looked, you know, it was like a cacophony at times, and it was too much of that to be a pleasurable listening experience. There had some things in there that you know, When You Sleep, for instance, was there was a cracking riff in When You Sleep, and what was the other one? There was another tune. I Only Said, that was it. I Only Said. I like that repetitive drone
Yeah.
Riff of I Only Said, but 5 minutes, it was far too much. Brian Eno loved it. Robert Smith loved it.
Yeah, top 3 album for Robert Smith.
Yeah,
Ever.
I can't say honestly that I did. It sounded, if you've been in bands, you go to rehearsal rooms. If you stand in the hallway of all the different rehearsal rooms all around you and recorded it, it would sound something like this. It sounded like 4 different bands playing 4 different genres and songs at the same time. And I can't say I particularly enjoyed it. I get why, I can hear wee hints of why it became so influential, but for me, nah.
Okay, well, it came out in 91, what did I say, November 91. So I know
Yeah.
we're kind of doing lists and stuff here. So it didn't sell particularly well, but it was a lot sort of critically acclaimed
Yeah.
pretty much immediately at the time. And then on your best of lists, it done well. So it actually was number 9 in the NME's list of that year. Bearing in mind it sold next to nothing, it was sort of fair effort, I thought. So what's anyone have a stab at the top 3? 91 NME
Never
Never
albums.
mind.
Never mind. Yeah.
Never mind's 1.
Screamadelica.
Screamadelica's 3.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what's 2?
Out of Time.
No, but it's a good shout, John. It's very good, mate. Bandwagon-esque.
What?
Bandwagon-esque. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think the reason I mentioned that was that Primal Scream and Nirvana, became pretty big selling bands, particularly Nirvana, obviously. But Teenage Fan Club didn't really, but they were a musicians band that everybody loved, including
Yeah.
Kurt Cobain, of course. So kind of parallels there between them and My Bloody Valentine. But Teenage Fan Club, I think, then had legs. They trained on, didn't they, over the next
But all
10 years.
3 of the other acts you mentioned there had songs, and
Yeah.
definable songs.
Yeah. I don't know. I love the sound. I'd love if somebody wrote songs for them to play them. I think it'd been an amazing album, but I'm just not sure there's songs in there. There's actually, I'll come to Steve in a second, but there was a thing about the lyrics that I found where somebody who really liked the album, I think it was from The Guardian, I haven't got his name here, but he was interviewing the pair of them, and he was asking about the lyrics, but they kept wanting to go back to the kind of the music, and he said, well, the lyrics are there, so you've obviously put them on for a reason, or it would just be an instrumental album. And they were like, oh, and he says, well, can you tell me the first line? Tell me the first line of any song. And they say, well, what song? And they says, Loomer. Tell me the first line of Loomer. And Butcher refused to even begin to think about what it might be. And Shield said, I have absolutely no idea what I was singing. And that's fine. I have no problem with that at all. And I think he was kind of slowly losing his mind anyway. But yeah,
have a fucking point,
Yeah. I
creating
don't mind
art.
lyrics.
No, if you my shoes, if you're creating some sort of art, have a fucking point. If you don't know and you're like, oof, whatever, is it art? Are you just fanning about? And that to me sounds like, I'd understand if they went, yeah, we went out of our way to create this. But if they're just saying, yeah, maybe it's just it's like fluff under the fucking keyboard. It's like, no.
But they took 22 years, didn't they, to do another one? Which actually isn't a bad record, to be fair. But again, could have been made at any time, I think. It does sound very similar to the previous one. Stephen, what's your take, mate?
I'm with George on this one. This mob existed on the very edge of my awareness. I was aware of them. I knew they were a thing. What are you drinking, by the way?
Beer.
But they never, ever, ever, ever hit the spot. Again, I've never bought it. I wouldn't ever buy it. There's something missing. There's something wrong. I don't know what it is. In my opinion, there's just something not there. I never quite grasped it. Maybe it's me, but it's not for me. I'll front it up and say not a chance. Is this one of the top 100 albums of all time? No, not in a million years.
Okay.
Say I'm not going to go do a deep dive on it or go into tracks or whatever, because I've never owned the album. I've never heard. I've heard half of it recently, last couple of days, and no, it's not my scene, man. Nope.
Okay. Well, the album kind of burst him, didn't they? So they kind of stopped really after this. He started doing other things. He ended up touring with Primal Scream, didn't he? Kevin Shields. For a while, actually, off and on. Remastered Screamadelica as well. 2010, I think that might have been. So he's got his chops, hasn't he? This guy knows what he's doing, I think.
I know what he's doing, Brian, but let's contextualize it. This is about this album in situ as a standalone piece of work. Does it belong in the top 100 albums of all time?
See, it really surprised me, Brian Eno liking it, because Brian Eno being like one of the gods of, production, this is almost like anti-production. It's willfully.
So not a bit ambient, George, in its own way. Not the ambience that you would associate with Eno, but it has an ambience to it, I think.
That's counter to ambience. Ambience, by definition, should suggest that something is, there. Whereas this is discordant. I'm not to say that discordant music is, necessarily, you have to rule it out completely, but this is more directionless than anything. Especially as you've just revealed that they didn't appear, they couldn't possibly define what was done, or they had no interest in defining what was done. It's an abstract concept, great, but you can't. No, I can't take this stuff.
Well, creation dropped.
Does it need direction? Surely that's the point of the record they've made.
But then maybe you and I can just go and sit in a studio and just fucking make noise and call it up. It may very well be up, but it'll be shite.
It's a bit it's a bit bitches brewish, I'm not sort of going down that rabbit hole again, but it is a bit that there's stuff in there that people say is like awe-inspiring. If
I get it, I get that part of it, but as a listener, it's not a pleasant experience. And I feel that about Bitches Brew as well. And I like Miles Davis. It's not a pleasant, audible experience.
Yep.
Very much an acquired taste.
An acquired taste. We'll acquire a vote in a second. Twitter were 58% no. So a bit touch and go, but they ended up saying no. There's a couple of comments from a couple of guys on there. So Rebel Rock said, loved all those bands at the time, but I always felt this was overhyped and overrated. I like it a bit more nowadays than I ever did, but for me, not top 100. Which I think was a kind of reasonable take on it. I think even guys, you mentioned Ride earlier on, John. Actually, I really like Ride, and probably still do actually quite like them, but at the time I thought they were amazing. So their debut album actually came out before this. And I thought it was amazing. Nowhere, still do.
It was, yeah.
I think it's miles ahead of this, because it's got songs on it and it's got some of the best drumming I've ever heard. So I don't mind this album at all. But I bought the Ride album that came out, and I'd probably buy it again. And I never bought this one, so I think there's a reason for that for me. So
I mean, just moving back to the loudest gigs ever. Ride were the loudest band I've ever seen live, and it was on that tour. And they'd also done about 4 EPs before their first album.
That's right.
Which are all, and
I've really
got them all, and go for quite a pretty penny now as well, the vinyl. So if you want to buy any, just let me know, and
Nah, John,
I'll,
I'm out there.
I'll fill you in. But no, I agree. Ride were far more melodic and had the tunes to match that. So I think I do like it. Is it top 100's fair point? I would probably say no.
Okay, so we'll get a no from John. See if we come back to John there. So John's a no, Stephen?
I stated straight up from the start. Is this a top 100 album? What John just said, and I would say absolutely not. It's not one of the best 100 albums of all time. No chance.
Okay, George?
No, fucking absolutely not.
Okay, I'm a no as well, but I do like the album. It's not in the sort of Drake world, but it's
But Brian, that's the criteria. Criteria is, does it stay in the top 100?
no, it doesn't, mate. Not from me. So I think we're 4 for 4. I've just picked a note up from Lisa as well, who obviously couldn't make it tonight, and I think she says, if I'm reading her note properly here, MBV out all that time, and they produced that ? Load of shite.
Well,
Okay.
thank you,
Which
Lisa.
is just Lisa's take on it.
Thanks for your
Take that
Europe
message,
correspondent.
Lisa. If you're around, pop in for the end.
You're very welcome, absolutely. Please do. Cool. And my only bit of trivia to move off was that his sister, Kevin Shield's sister, designs shoes for Bono. Yeah.
Don't get me started on him.
The gift to
Cuban
keep
heels.
the big Cuban heels, yeah. And a hat for his mullet. Right, 73, 72 was Neil Young, Harvest. So back to that kind of eclectic thing that we always talk about, which we definitely get on this list. So what did Rolling Stone say? Harvest yielded Neil Young's only #1 hit, Heart of Gold, and helped set the stage for the 70s soft rock explosion. Both James Taylor and Linda Ronstadt singing the album. Along with Young, they were in Nashville to appear on Johnny Cash's variety show that week, and the week that Harvest was cut, with an odd group of accomplished session musicians that included bassist Tim Drummond, who had played with James Brown. The sound was Americana, steel guitar, slide guitar, banjo, stripped down and rebuilt with every jagged edge exposed. The standout tracks included Old Man and The Needle and the Damage Done. Released February 72. Neil Young, Harvest, we've already had After the Gold Rush on the list, so this is his second one. I think it's his last one on the top 100. So who wants to go first?
I'll jump in.
George.
It's probably his most consistently intimate piece of work until Harvest Moon 20 years later. It opens up with a couple of understated burrito-esque love songs about the actress Carrie Snodgrass, who he ended up hooking up with for years and having a son with. And then he drops the much misunderstood A Man Needs a Maid and Heart of Gold, which are just absolute belters, and they're among Young's own personal favourites from this period, and mine too. You know, when he sings that line, "When will I see you again?" It's so aching. It's perfect. Love it, and the contributions of soon-to-be superstars like Linda Ronstadt and James Taylor really elevate some already great songs into something quite sublime. And for an artist so associated with that Laurel Canyon scene, the bulk of the album was actually recorded in Nashville using Nashville, musicians. But the orchestration was recorded in Barking in East London, right, with the LSO, and it was arranged by Jack Nietzsche, who's on this and get his hands all over it, and he later married Carrie Snodgrass, so it's all quite incestuously tied up. But as an album itself, it's a slow burner for me, and I really, really enjoyed hearing some of those tunes again for the first time in a long, long time. Old Man's a fucking mighty tune, an absolute mighty tune, and the backing vocals and the chorus just make it for me. And Needle and the Damage Done's got to be one of the greatest anti-drug songs ever. So yeah, for me, Harvest, Neil Young definitely makes the cut.
So this was a follow-up to After the Gold Rush,
Yep.
which I think ended 2 years before that, and they pretty much had wrote the songs and, as you say, then just recorded them when he was down at Nashville and finished them back at his own place. But it was kind of the opposite of some of his other stuff, that it was actually commercially huge. You know, he had a number one single with Heart of Gold, which he never had any other time. But actually, critics didn't pan it. That's not fair, but pretty nonplussed about it, because they've seen it as a little bit of a sort of same again record to After Gold Rush, and I would just wonder what your thoughts are on that. I mean, there is a similar feel to it, but I think there's a different thing about it. You know, the strings and the lyrics and stuff are quite different.
I found it quite personal. It's for Neil Young to be that personal about life, mortality, love, death. It was a very, very personal album for me, and obviously after two very understated openers coming in with A Man Needs a Maid with that incredible, like, really dominant orchestration, really set the album up brilliantly. No, I loved it. It's one of the Neil Young albums that I listened to. It's one of the ones that I would get back to more often than not. So big thumbs up for me.
And he's as I think I mentioned earlier on, he's got 7 in the original 500 Rolling Stone list. He's got 7, which I think only the Beatles have got more of. But they're all solo. He's got no Buffalo Springfield in there. There's no Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young.
Is there any minor birds? Has he got the minor birds?
No, the minor birds aren't in there, I'm afraid. No, that'd be a good shout.
A lot of people don't know that Neil Young was actually on Motown Records.
Yeah, he was,
with Rick James. He was in a band with Rick James, famous super freak, called the Minor Birds. And they sort of a couple of records and then crashed and burned quite quickly and disbanded. But very unlike the normal Motown roster stars. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and they mentioned that, and Tim Drummond has mentioned the intro there, and they literally got him, didn't they? Walking down a street, I think, in Nashville, because they're looking for a bass player. So, whole interest in London and stuff. So we'll maybe dig in a wee bit more before we finish on that one. John?
I'm going to have to take the 5th on this one because it wasn't available to listen to. When I tried to listen to it today on the streaming platform that I use. So...
Okay, that's fine.
You'll need to, pass me by. Sorry.
No bother, mate. I think you're right, because he's obviously fallen out with Spotify. I don't know if it's on Apple. I'm not on Apple, so I don't know.
I listened to it today on Amazon.
I was on Amazon. I was YouTube. I just found it on YouTube. Somebody played the album basically, and I sat and listened to it.
I didn't think to even check that on YouTube. Good point.
Yeah. I'll come back to that. Stephen.
Education. I had no idea about the Minor Birds thing.
I know.
Cheers, George. I'm on the fence with this guy. Some brilliant stuff, some stuff that would make you want to jump off a high building. I can't make my mind up. This album should be in the top 100. I'd probably say yes. I'd go along with George. Yes.
Because
it works. It works. It ticks all the right boxes, and yeah, I just like it. And he was out there. It was a bit different. You know, he wasn't going along mainstream. This was good stuff. You know, it's not. I wouldn't call it one of my personal top 100 albums, blah blah blah. But I think it belongs in there. I do believe it's a quality, first class piece of music and belongs in the top 100.
Okay. It sounds fantastic. I think that's probably one of my observations on it. George, you mentioned the strings and stuff, which are
the production's unbelievable.
But even the sort of basic, the sort of guitar and sing along stuff, it's kind of
clarity
of sound.
The production, everything about it is first class.
Yep. No,
there's a couple of turkeys on there. I mean, what album doesn't? But I like it. I like it.
And I think
I'd put it in.
I think the Danny Whitten thing's quite interesting because you know most guys know the story. I think about Danny from Crazy Horse and what have you. But again,
Yeah, yeah.
without checking up on it, I wasn't quite aware of the sort of timeline for all of that. So so in case you don't know, he was in and out of the band. They brought him back to get ready for touring. Couldn't hack it, and Young sent him home with a plane ticket, and he died that night when he went home. So I think not because of Young, of course, but I think he took it quite particularly bad for a while, which I guess you would. And yeah, and there's obviously songs all about him as well, which is kind of quite interesting. Best-selling album in 1972 in the Billboard in America. And he had that famous quote, didn't he, saying that he was in the middle of the road and didn't like it, so he headed for the ditch, or worse to that effect. Yeah, and the next three albums were his ditch
Well,
trilogy.
yeah, the next three albums after this were a real departure away from fame and that whole bullshit world that
Yeah,
other artists seem to be getting pulled into, you know, especially as Crosby, Stills and Nash buddies, they were getting pulled into the whole, you know, show busy rock and roll kind of thing. And he was like, no, this is not for me.
no,
And the next three albums are absolute fucking bonkers,
yeah.
you know.
But good, great bonkers, but bonkers
It's just, they're not
nonetheless. Yeah,
commercial in the slightest, you know.
yeah. There's a quick story about the album itself before we move on, which is that they finished it, they recorded a bunch of it in Nashville, and then went back to this barn and ranch that he had and finished the rest of it up there. But when they were pretty much finished and they wanted to do a playback, Graham Nash came up and they took a rowing boat out to the little lake that was in the middle of the ranch. And he asked, don't know what the engineer it was, but he asked the engineer if he could do a playback on the boat because he wanted to hear it in like maximum surround sound, open sound, George, as open as he could get it. So, so the guy thought he basically just wanted to play it out the barn, but he says, no, he says, I want as many speakers and amps as you can get in the barn, and then I want the same amount of speakers and amps in the house. And they sat right in the middle of the two, and then they played it like this, 50 yards apart thing, and they were sitting in a little rowing boat listening in the middle. And it was trying, I think a guy had a megaphone or something, and he's shouting to him, what do you think? And
More cowbell.
Neil Young shouted, more barn, I need more barn. So, so I think the guy's an absolute one-off, right? And you can see that in his records. You could see why he would just jump from here after doing two pretty straight records to absolutely going and doing something else. So whether it's commercial or not, it's just what he wants to do. I really liked it. I'm a big Neil Young fan, but I'm as happy listening to Crazy Horse stuff as I am his solo, his acoustic. But I think it's a really good album. We talk about the odd live thing, and just again for anybody that's listening or wants to check it out. There's I think it was on BBC Four a while back, but it's still on YouTube. Where in '71 he came over to the UK and played about half an hour or so, one of his little BBC sort of.
That's fantastic.
It plays, 5 or 6 of the songs are from Harvest, albeit that it's not released until the following year. So basically, it's kind of first time anyone's heard them, and it's just him. It's amazing, George. Yeah,
I've seen it. Yeah, I've seen it. It's really good.
Well worth checking out, mate. Twitter, we're 75% yes. It's 37 minutes. Absolute sweet spot for me. John, I know you've not heard it, but you'd vote it in if it's 37 minutes, mate, wouldn't you?
I would say John probably would. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Sorry, I'd have to PS to all that. What else I got from? Yeah, played in the Monkees album. Instant Replay.
Oh,
seriously? I mean, come on, man's a ledge, right? Rick James, Monkees. And he is, there's a reason I mentioned this, right? The 100 top Canadian albums of all time, he's number 1 and number 3. Okay. But I just thought I'd mention that Rush have also got 2 in the top 20. So it's just a matter of time when we have this debate, guys. They're right up there with Young, obviously. So
okay, I'm for at least until you're talking about Rush again.
I know, she'll be on in a minute. So 75% yes for Twitter. I'm certainly in. George, what's your?
Yeah, absolutely for me.
Brilliant. Yep. Stephen?
Hell yes.
Perfect. And John, you're a silent majority, mate.
I'll take that.
Okay, and we'll try and keep you posted on the YouTube stuff because the Neil, I don't think I saw last Neil Young, so I don't know if there's any others that we won't get, but it does make it a bit awkward for sure. Okay, good stuff. One down, 4 down, 1 to go. 71 is Bob Marley with Exodus. Okay, talk about some big hitters. So, as the title suggests, this album wasn't recorded in Jamaica. After Bob Marley took a bullet in a 1976 assassination attempt, he relocated the Wailers to London. But tracks such as Jamming are still suffused with the deep essence of reggae and life at home. Three Little Birds, for example, had been written on the back steps of Marley's home in Kingston, where he would sit and smoke herb. Each time Marley rolled a spliff, he would discard the seeds, and the birds of the song title would pick them up. The music have a purpose, Marley said, and his spiritual intent was never clearer than in the anthem One Love, with its message of redemption and revolution. Released in June 77, right in the middle of the punk revolution, based in London. So, yeah, quite an interesting landing. So, Bob Marley, Exodus, who wants to take us away for the last one tonight? Stephen.
I'll go first.
Go on, Stephen.
You go first, Stephen. There you go.
Not a fan.
Okay.
I do like
What,
a bit of reggae now and again.
Not a fan of Bob Marley or reggae or what?
Reggae in general.
Okay.
It just never, ever, ever lit my candle. I don't know why it should with the stuff I like, but I've never got it. I don't know if it's a cultural thing. It's me just being ignorant. I don't know. But it's never hit me at all. I don't have a single reggae record. I've got a zillion records, as you know, but it's never struck me. Never. I'm sure as part of the genre, it is a masterpiece. I'm sure it very probably is, but it's never personally hit me at all. Reggae.
And
I don't know.
even like the hit singles on here, so it was a very
Oh, they're great. I wouldn't turn off
record.
the radio when they come on, you know. But it's not for me. Personal. It's a purely personal thing. I mean,
So what about when the Clash do things like White Man and House with Pally and stuff
exactly.
like that?
That's I know. Again, I won't put it off, but I'm not
No,
overly
still not keen on it. No.
enthused about it. I
Okay.
I simply don't like it.
Okay.
I know, and it's probably terribly naive and ignorant, but I've just never bought into the idea at all.
So he has the assassination attempt on him, which I think is what's the back end of '76, and he
Yeah.
comes
I
straight
know the
much.
history. Yeah.
Yeah, is that right? He comes straight to London, I think, after that, and then finishes the record off in London.
I think straight in amongst the '70s, mid-'70s punk scene.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Get all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what he was doing, I somehow bypassed. You know, the rest of it hit me straight between the eyes, but
Yeah.
the reggae side of it didn't.
Okay.
And I don't know why that is.
Okay. So you sound like I know.
Well, man, that's harsh. It probably is a no. I mean, and then I'll probably get castigated to death.
Have a think about it then. Don't jump in to see what the guys are saying.
Have I?
Okay, mate. John.
Yeah, I think this is Marley at the peak of his powers. I think Exodus is a fantastic album. I think you listen to the songs now, the songs haven't aged. It still sounds to me incredibly fresh. I think the album for me, in many ways, it is a two-sided album. I think the first side is particularly a bit more laid back than side two. I mean, Exodus finishes off side one, and it's about 8 minutes long on this version, and it's just exudes class. I think side two, it's basically hit after hit. Jamming, Waiting in Vain, Three Little Birds, One Love, just an extraordinary run of songs on that second side. You're right, I think it was assassination attempt, and it, relocated to London pretty much right away, and took an apartment in Basing Street Studios, along with his personal chef, and he was camped there for about a year while they went through recording the album. There's even elements of a little bit of funk going on in songs like, I think it's The Heathen, side one. But I love it. And I really like the drumming on it as well. And was it, so reading up about it earlier, and the drummer, Carly Barrett, he actually did get assassinated when he was 36, 1987, back in Jamaica.
Okay.
So he got shot dead a few years, 10 years after this album came out. But I think it's Marley is an absolute peak with the Wailers.
And would you be a Marley fan, John, or a reggae fan, or what's your take on it?
Yeah.
So if you go back a few years to the original Wailers with Peter Tosh and Bunny Wailer and all, so that was kind of harder reggae, for want of a better word.
Yeah.
Would you still be into that stuff as well?
I can pick bits and pieces out of it. He's got a live album which escapes me the name, but it's absolutely fantastic.
Live, I think it's called.
I think it. Yeah. Then obviously you've got the compilation Legend. It's fantastic. I've picked up a couple of his albums, but back in the day, and some of the other reggae stuff, I absolutely love. You mentioned some of the punk crossover. I think some of that stuff's the best stuff that the Clash put out. Police and Thieves, White Man, Hammersmith, all that sort of stuff. So, this gets a big tick in the box for me.
Okay, cheers, mate. George? I think John's pretty much nailed a lot of what I was going to say. Just to, back him up on this. This is in the aftermath of the assassination attempt. This is Marley moving into the big leagues. To paraphrase him, he knows where he's going, and it starts off with a couple of songs that sort of mirror a spiritual path, but the story takes a turn when it arrives at Exodus end of side one. Side two is the quality of the songs and performances on side two of Exodus are arguably unsurpassed in Bob Marley's canon of work. Outstanding stuff. Aston Barrett and Carly Barrett, Family Man and Carly are just one of the ultimate rhythm sections. I think they'd be fighting out with Sly and Robbie for title of reggae's greatest rhythm section. But they anchor the collection brilliantly. You've got the I3s, the beautiful, perfectly judged, non-showy backing vocals, Judy Moore, Marcia Griffiths, and Bob's then wife Rita Marley turning great songs into transcendent ones. But you can also hear how influenced Bob was by the stuff he was hearing, not just in the UK, but that sort of smooth Philly soul. Turn Your Lights Down Low is pure Pendergrass. And he's obviously influenced by people like Stevie Wonder. You know what Stevie Wonder and that, who in turn was influenced by Marley himself. So those kind of crossovers are wonderful. Waiting in Vain for me is an absolute standout. But you're talking, I think that second side of Exodus is as good a side of an album as any album. You put any album up against it in the 1970s, and that side will be as good as anyone's. It's that good. Probably his finest album, and sadly, within 4 years, it was gone. Tragic.
I wrote down, scribbled my notes, and I wrote down side two, best side ever, question mark.
Seriously, it's like...
And I am not a massive reggae fan. I really like Bob Marley, and there's other stuff. I love reggae infused music. I love that. John touched on stuff earlier and various genres with reggae in there. But I just sat and listened to the record, and the side two just blew me away, George.
There's not a weak note on that second. The first half's really good, but it sets you up perfectly for side two, which is just absolute killer. It's a killer side. And as John said, that they sound really fresh. You're listening to them, that's nearly 50 years old. If you hear that on the radio now, it's so fresh, it's so vibrant, it's so full of life. An incredible side of music, really is. 100% in for me.
Do you think the assassination attempts got so I call it a kind of love album for want of a better word. Side two is very much about sort of peace and love and being
Yeah,
together and stuff. So you think when he's moved away from that and he's had this brush with death, do you think that sort of pushed him into, because once he does this, before he dies, his last couple of albums become quite political again.
yeah, yeah.
Uprising and Survival,
Uprising.
they're more in that world again, aren't they?
I
So
take a wee bit of a wee bit of stock in his life.
yeah,
I know his marriage with Rita Marley broke up about this kind of time, and he hooked up with I was Miss Jamaica. He hooked up with and decided that's it. I'm just, I may not be long
well,
for this
why wouldn't
earth,
you,
so
right?
I'm gonna be enjoying myself playing football with my pals in the parks in London and just getting my jollies with supermodels while I recuperate. And then he comes back and there's still work to be done, as you can see later on, a couple of albums before he eventually passed, but nothing is consistently excellent as side two of Exodus. That is probably, as I said earlier, probably one of the greatest sides of the decade.
Yep, here. Yeah, we'll kind of have a wee vote on that. The sort of association comment I got was that it was thought to be politically motivated because it was all about the elections in Jamaica at the time, and there was this concert and he was there to support to Manly.
Niagara,
Yep,
yeah.
absolutely. So he said, nonetheless, concert proceeded and an injured Marley performed as scheduled 2 days after the assassination attempt. When asked why he performed, Marley responded, "The people who are trying to make this world worse aren't taking a day off. How can I?"
Fair play, Bob.
Which, fair play, Bob. You're tipping lots of hats and bonnets and all the other
Yep.
things that you tip there. Cool. So, 37 minutes long, 79% yes on Twitter. They were feeling the love. Am I right in saying, just to finish off, and I'm frequently wrong on this stuff, so One Love, that's an old Whaler song, isn't it, from mid-60s? Is that right? That's on their first album, I think. I think they re-recorded it for this album.
Yeah, because there's a bit of People Get Ready with Curtis Mayfield
Yeah,
again, isn't there?
which is twice it's appeared on
Right,
on this
today.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a song, isn't it? To be fair. But I'm pretty sure that it was, I can't remember what the original band was called, but mid-60s record, and I'm sure this is on it. And then obviously somewhere down the line they re-record it for Exodus.
The
So
band's not originally the Wailing Wailers.
well, I'm
Yeah,
sure
that's right. It was the Wailers from the debut studio album called The Wailing Wailers in
Wailing Wailers,
1965.
and is it on there, John?
Aye.
Is it? Oh, there you go. Good. Well,
Yeah.
I just get worried there since I was on video for the rest of my
No,
life. So.
no, you're good.
But it's an amazing song, amazing record. Absolute tragedy, obviously, that he died in, was it 81, I think, wasn't it?
81, yeah, 36 years old.
Yeah, and just brutal. And squaring all of those things off, the last thing I picked out was that it was voted Album of the Century by Time magazine. And one of these, the Millennium thing that they were all doing. So Time voted Exodus the album of the century, which you can take or leave that depending on your view on it. But
yeah, I probably wouldn't call it album of the century, but
no,
it's definitely a reggae album of the century, and it's one of the greatest albums of the 1970s, which puts it high up on the list for greatest albums of all time. So, which means it shouldn't be anywhere fucking near the position it's in at the moment.
Yeah, well, once we get Stephen back on side, we'll start nudging it up when we get a chance to revote down the line. I also, talking so many things that I don't know about life. I also thought that get this right now, Junior Marvin and Junior Mervin were the same person, right? I know that now, right? Because I'm a bit of a dickhead, right? But I just thought because they were all in that same genre. I think I'm right in saying he was from Jamaica as well. Police and Thieves. I just thought it was one big
legendary song.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not the same guy.
That wasn't. I'm learning by the day on this stuff, which is fantastic. And number 2 and 3, just for you, John. Number 2 on the Time album, The Century, was "Kind of Blue" by Miles Davis.
That's a great album.
Which we're coming to, mate. And
are we? I can't
Aaron,
wait.
You can't wait. Don't
John,
make sure you're on that one, John. Right?
John, trust me, it's so not like Bitches Brew. It's nothing like Bitches Brew.
And number 3 was Are You Experienced by Jimi Hendrix, which I think we're coming to as well. So,
Good.
Those were the 3-time albums of the century.
correct.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Okay,
that's
do you know it was number 4, George? Love List by My Bloody Valentine.
2112 was number 5, mate. Right. So let's say, so I'm a slam dunk for that. I think it's a great record. So I'm in on that one. George,
Absolute thumbs up for me.
John,
100% in.
Stephen, right back at you, mate. What
You
was
want to be politicians? Seriously.
Are you still out?
It was when one of the guys detailed the B-side, if that's still a thing, the track list. I started thinking, oh, wait, oh, that's brilliant. Oh, that's brilliant. Oh, my God, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
You know, I'd forgotten. I haven't heard it in so long. I'm not a reggae fan. However, I would suggest that it is probably one of the top 100 albums of all time. I'd put it in.
Cool. There you are. Feel better now, mate.
I've been talked around. I've been coerced.
Go and buy it at a bargain bin somewhere. Make you feel better. Okay, so that's us. We've done 5 tonight, so I'm just double checking. So we've got Aretha in, we've got Kanye out, we've got My Bloody Valentine out, we've got Neil Young in, and we've got Bob Marley in. I think is what I've made that 3 out of 5, which will make it 17 out of 30 in my little bookmaker maths. Okay, that we've voted in so far. So we're getting there. So we'll only got another 83 to fill to make it 100. So take us a bit of time.
Has anybody had any thoughts on albums that should be in that aren't there?
Yes.
Yes.
I've tried not to look too far through the top 100 because I like getting 3 surprises as to what's coming next.
Yep.
Hold that thought, Stephen. The answer is yes, of course, and I know the guys have as well. I certainly know Lisa has. So I think we'll maybe start to nudge into that the more we get further down the list, because we will have to start taking some sort of submissions to have another review of a bunch of songs, so a bunch of records. That'll be good fun. And on that point, John, for the next episode, our next 5 are NWA, Straight Outta Compton. One for you, George.
Crazy Mother, called Ice Cube.
Absolutely. Alanis Morissette, Jagged Little Pill, John. We make a little guest on for this one, maybe?
I'll try and get Mrs. Welsh to cover off my 10 minutes in that one.
That would be fantastic. Kate Bush, Hounds of Love.
Oh, aye.
Oh, aye, indeed. Jay-Z, Reasonable Doubt.
Or Jay-Z, if he's known in Glasgow.
And
is it not Jay-Z?
No, right, Jay-Z.
Jay-Z.
Hey, you.
Brilliant.
Jay-Z.
And last but by no means least, John Coltrane, I Love Supreme. Okay, so that's going to twist our melons, as they say. So that's the next 5 for our next episode. But yeah, really good fun. Another 3 in there, and some good chat along the way. Right. So can't thank you enough. Really good fun. Have we missed anything? We all good?
Get well soon, Lisa.
Get well soon, Lisa. Absolutely.
Yeah,
it's not the same without her. And hopefully Marion might stick her head on the next one as well and put the men in place a little bit. Yeah, it's just what we need.
Did you see the Soup Dragons have reformed?
Yes.
I did see that. Tickets out on Wednesday.
Fantastic.
Happy days.
Good day.
Yeah, can't wait, mate. It's going to be great. Yeah, going to be great. I'll be up on the stage. Yeah.
You've been told not to do that.
Oh, brilliant. Guys, listen, thank you very much for your time, and enjoy the rest of your night, and we'll all catch up again soon. All right?
Cheers,
Love you all.
Take care now. See you later.
Cheers,
Bye now.